3 2s and 1s.
You are listening. You are watching. You are observing. You are joining.
Joining.
What did we say last week? Hello, saltines. We are here with another of our ridiculous podcast episodes.
We love them.
We thank you so much for supporting the podcast as always by listening and watching us. We have a lot of listener questions this evening.
Yay!
And rather than trying to squeeze these in here and there over the next 3 or 4 weeks, I figured it would be good to let's just blast these out, and we're going to make tonight a night for answering questions. Okay. And in the process, we of course will get up to some of our usual foolishness.
Shenanigans.
I've no doubt. Is that what they're called? Shenanigans.
Shenanigans.
Okay.
Yes. So the first question, if we're going to start, should we start?
Go for it.
Okay. So the first question comes from our listener, Maddie. I'm just going to read the entire thing.
Are we giving names?
I'm doing names.
Okay.
So if you send us questions and you don't want us to use your names, then...
Use an alias.
Oh,
that'd be fun. We could get some cool aliases.
That'd be really cool aliases.
Give us cool aliases. Though.
Yeah.
Don't be dumb.
Yeah, don't do
if your name's...
Starseed, Earth... Flower, Lady Moon, Earth Goddess. Don't do anything like that. I want it to be
that's the very next message we get will be from someone who's
I want it to be Nose Picker 5000.
What question do you have?
So our question comes from Maddie. It's a longer one. It's more of a what do you think we should do kind of feel. So first of all, I just wanted to say that I love the podcast. My summer back from college has been basically dedicated to listening to all the episodes. Second of all, I'm kind of looking for some insight of a baneful working that I performed. Context. I'm a fairly new practitioner. I have only performed a couple of spells. Initially, my working was smaller and probably would be considered a jinx. I used a tag lock, their hair, a piece of paper with their name, my own spit, red pepper flakes, cayenne pepper, and hot sauce. I'm very aware that sounds like it came straight from TikTok, but I'm in a Christian household. Spicy things work.
Yeah.
Anyway, I did some divination, and shocker, it was not super strong working. I upped the ante a little bit with my next working. I used a larger jar and put the contents of my first working in it, and this time I charged my ingredients with intention / what I wanted them to do. Good job. Mm-hmm. This time I used another tag lock, a picture, set it on fire, and then put it in the jar. I also used rusty nails, vinegar, used cigarettes, a rusty razor blade, red pepper flakes, bones, and urine. It sounds super gross, but it had a much stronger energy to it and intention behind it. I also utilized a sigil that I made for this working, which I set on fire and put in the jar. After the working, I put the jar in my closet for a month and threw it out. Even more context, I threw it out by my beach that I clean up after the geese. Okay. Anyway, after my working, I did fall victim to the cord cutting trend because of my past attachment to this person. He is my abusive ex. I'm definitely rambling, but I would love to hear how your insights to this working, and of course, how I can improve in the future. Again, love the pod, and any insight from you guys would be greatly appreciated. Best.
Well, to be honest, as you were reading this, I feel like with just one or two kind of question marks, I kind of feel like this sounded like legit. This sounded like a good work.
Yeah, I think the second working sounded a little bit more
as is always
effective.
The case. I think that so many people get so concerned with, did I do it right? Am I good? Am I good? Tell me I'm good. Tell me I'm good.
Grade me, for the love of God, grade me.
And I think that's a normal human thing. But I think, as always, regardless of method and your approach, really what it comes down to is, did you get results? Mm-hmm. The one thing that, as you were reading those, that kind of struck me initially was okay, with all the stuff that you put in the jar, you also put your spit in the jar, mm-hmm. which struck me as a little odd for a baneful working, particularly a baneful working that was focused around other person. Mm-hmm. Usually you want whatever's going in that jar to be purely that person. Mm-hmm. And the things you want to do to that person. Yeah. Right? So I thought the inclusion of spit was an interesting choice, because in essence you're putting yourself into that jar with mm-hmm. the person. So I'm wondering if maybe that could have been something that added to maybe that first one, maybe not kicking off quite as well as they'd liked it or would have liked it to.
I mean, possibly. I mean, there's folklore around like witch's spit being venom.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Oh, no, not just no. I know culturally, like spit has a lot of like, that pops up. But I know that that was one thing that again just kind of hit me. But again, I suppose it would really kind of depend on the nature of the work. I mean, it's a baneful working, but like really, what were you asking for?
Yeah.
Right. Because that would certainly be something else. Like within the second instance with the other jar, they added urine to that, and I could see some use for that in
Domination.
Work because that's a very clear way to assert domination or control over someone, and that could certainly be an element of an effective baneful working.
But it can also potentially tie you to your target, because urine is used in some conjure work when you're trying to dominate someone to like mark them as yours.
Yeah, very true.
So, there's some odd things there. Have I used my spit in hexes and curses against people? Yes, I have. But it all is infused with an incantation that I use for a witch's venom curse. And then usually followed up with some other things. So I honestly think that their working seemed pretty awesome. I am gonna say, it's most likely justified. Obviously, you want to make sure you do your readings and your divination before you do a baneful work, just because you want to make sure that what you're going to do, 1, is going to land, 2, is going to be effective, and 3 isn't just petty. Now if this is an abusive ex, like you stated, then I don't think that's petty, but I also think that this is probably some sort of catharsis for this individual.
Oh yeah. Baneful work, particularly when you're doing that working on someone who's victimized you. Oh God, that can be hugely healing.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
hugely healing.
Huge. Now pucker your lips like a butthole.
No, thank you. Not here. On camera.
Huge. It's huge.
Would you like a chair? There are more chairs here.
No,
Okay.
So
I broke the fourth wall.
We always break the fourth wall, though. Let's be real.
There is no fourth wall. Okay. All in all, I want to say like I like this. I thought this was a good working, and again, the main thing to remember is, of course, did you see results? The disposal of the working was another interesting piece for me.
Yeah.
Because typically, and again, I don't really know. Like if you got results, if by the time you did the second part of that with the second jar that you used, if you were seeing that it was working, and you got what you wanted, then of course at that point, yes, there would probably be like, okay, now's the time to probably dispose of the spell. But I don't know. They don't really quite clearly say how exactly they did that, right? Just that they kind of like threw it out.
Yeah, that's my other question, because normally if you're disposing of a baneful working, there are 2 universally acceptable ways that you do that. You just throw it in the trash off your property, like a dumpster.
Like, well, they put it at a beach or something like that.
Right? That's
what it seemed that right there also was a little odd to me. And
yeah.
like, why would you do that to the local, like the spirits there?
Yeah.
And yeah.
But then also like a graveyard. So it depends on the working.
You're already yawning? My goodness.
I also want to say you're not the only person who's fallen victim to the cord cutting spell of TikTok.
He's talking about me.
So many candles and so much jute. No, the cord cutting spell on TikTok, the first thing is I want everyone to realize that it's not that it's an invalid spell as much as it's not a cord cutting. What you're doing is you're doing a separation. It's a burning bridge spell.
Yeah.
And if you want to burn bridges with this individual, cool, great, but they're going to find a way back in your life. And so tying 2 candles together with a string, lighting it on fire is just a fire hazard. There are much more effective ways to get rid of a person. Use scissors. It works great.
Or how about like just not spiritually bypassing your entire life and just, like assert some healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
And block that person's number in your phone and forgive yourself for the mistake that you made in allowing that person to get so close, and acknowledge that they're garbage and move on with your life.
Well, and everyone makes mistakes is the thing. Cord cutting is not going to make your entire life better. Cord cutting if not done right, can leave a gaping wound in your aura.
Gaping?
Yeah.
I think on a metaphysical level, the whole concept of the cord cutting is something that confuses me, because the cords, the threads that people use when they do that spell, those are supposed to represent energetic cords, like tendrils that people have. They're supposed to run back and forth right between us. But on a metaphysical level, that's not really how things are seen to work. You talk about what that really looks like. What you see is, instead of cords running between two spirits, two souls, you see instead emanations of spirit or personal energy that basically overlap each other's bodily fields. So it's like you're not really cutting a cord. What you need to do is you need to do something that really effectively allows you to close a door.
Yep.
Or to assert a boundary.
Yeah.
And again, I want to say the best way to assert a boundary is to assert a boundary. Stop burning your candles. Stop tying your candles up with twine, and just assert a boundary.
Yeah.
You know, and I know that's so hard, and everybody wants the easy answer, right? Everybody wants the magic answer that'll just take care of everything. But how often, and you mentioned this a moment ago, how often do we see people doing these things and they do nothing? You know, like that person is still there. You know, that person pops back up and once again infiltrates their lives. You know, and really the reason for that is because they burned all those candles, they did all that work, but the next day that person texted and they answered the text.
Yep. That one of the most empowering things you can do as a witch is to reclaim your power by setting healthy boundaries. That's just what it is. And no amount of black salt, cord cutting, red brick dust, eggshells, or anything like that is going to make someone stay away from you. It can help set a boundary for energy, but you still have to be that person who goes, oh, they texted me. Delete. Block. You have to be the person who does that. You have to be the person who sets that boundary. And your magic should empower you to do that. That's really true. That's really effective magic. If you just back your mundane actions with the magical things. You know, every single time something is upset in your world and you're going through a string of bad luck, because that's life, you're not hexed, you're not cursed. Maybe just sit and accept that life is a little shitty right now, and then you'll find that things start to get better. Learn to say no to another project. You know? So, but all in all, I think the baneful working they did was good. And I would say maybe next time, try and keep less of yourself in your baneful working, and maybe avoid jar work. And leave the ocean out of it.
Yeah, and please don't dispose. Like I know that there are a lot of resources out there. There are a lot of books and things that tell you, like, well, when you're done with something, go and, I can't remember what it was. I want to say it was a Raven Wolf book.
Probably.
But I should be, just being fair, for almost an entire generation of witches, Silver Raven Wolf is all they had. So, so it's, but if I recall correctly, I think that one of her books, she talks about basically taking the remnants of a spell and going and like putting them in like a local river or like a local water supply of some sort to like wash the energy away. Was kind of the idea. And I remember reading that years ago as a younger witch and thinking, oh my God, why would you do that to the water? And whatever else is in the water, right? Who knows where that water is going to end up? But I know that there are sources out there that say, oh, well, just when you're done, just go and put it out in nature. But you do need to be, considering what it is you've put into that spell. You've got a jar out there now. You put, from what you said, something on a beach, like glass. You put rusty razor blades and nails and all kinds of other biological waste kinds of crap. Even just the red pepper flakes. I mean, you have to consider once that glass shatters and those things are all over the land there, like animals that are going to come into contact with that stuff. People who were walking through the area, who knows, who might trip and fall and end up with, who knows, a rusty razor blade in their, their leg. Who knows, right? So do be mindful of those things. But otherwise, yes, I think all the correspondences, the components that they used, I would say, good. Sounds like good work.
Yeah. Okay, let's do one of your questions now.
Okay, so we have a question from L.
Okay.
They say, I listen to your podcast and I appreciate the helpful info that you always share. I've been looking for resources on practical spell work and they're not sure which books may be reputable resources. They ask us if we could recommend some good books to start with. They understand that there are many traditions, but they would also like us to share info on what a spell could look like from start to finish. Okay. Looks like we've got a few different ones here. Let's kind of go through these one by one. Okay, so we've talked about books on the podcast before, and I want to say that practical spell work, ideally, once you've made the commitment to really be like, you want to live your best witch life, you want to really be that magical practitioner of whatever variety or title, right? You really, ideally, you need to get to a point where the spell work you're doing, the most practical spell work that you're going to be doing, is actually going to be the spell work that you create.
Yes.
And I know that as somebody who's new or newer to their practice, the idea of sitting down and writing your own spell might seem really intimidating. But you're going to find that if you've learned some of your basics, if you've learned your fundamentals around witchcraft or magical practice, you're going to find that, or you should find, I should say, that writing your own spells is really going to be very intuitive. It should be something that really kind of just comes.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're channeling that, right? You're channeling the knowledge that you have. You're channeling your spiritual power, and that also is keeping it highly practical, right? So books can be wonderful sources for information, and there can be a lot of really good books out there that have spells in them. But I would say a good 70% of those books are going to be, it's crap. It's something that somebody has cobbled together from who knows where. Or who knows, maybe it was a really good spell for the person who wrote it in the book, but that doesn't mean that spell's going to work for you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because those things can be very personal. So rather than giving you specific books to look at, once again, what I prefer to do is I prefer to steer you toward authors that I can assure you are reputable sources for information, and many of whom have written books that do include spells and information on spells and ritual structure. Okay, and we have our regulars, right? Like, we love Laura Tempest Sakroff, right? We always drop her name, right? Cauldron with a K, K-E-L-D-E-N, right? Yes, we've got visual aids.
So Sigil Witchery.
Sigil Witchery by Laura Tempest Sakroff. I'm stumbling over that name.
Sigils are a great place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Sigils are they're so accessible. Anyone can do them, and they can be used for just about anything. Cauldron, who has a couple books out right now.
Cauldron wrote The Witch's Sabbath, as well as The Crooked Path.
Yes.
Anatomy of a Witch by Zakroff as well.
Mastering Magic by Matt Oren.
Yes. Modern Witch by Devin Hunter.
Okay. Psychic Witch would be a good one.
Psychic Witch only has a couple of spells in it, but it's going to teach you how to...
This one's good, though, I think, because it gives you what you need to know to kind of like prepare yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
I know.
I dropped the other one. Hold on.
I dropped.
No, I was trying to take the flame. Let me do this. Oh, it's very white. There's glare. Mastering... Oh, okay. That's not getting any better. That's okay. Mastering Magic.
There we go. Mastering Magic by Matt Oren.
Did it. You saved me. Anyway, so Matt Oren, Laura Tempest Sakroff, Cauldron.
Will you hand me Modern Witch by Devin Hunter, please?
We're pulling these off of our shelf here in the store. We have a backstop.
So, Modern Witch by Devin Hunter. This goes through a little bit of basics around spell work and how to work those things, but it also has lots of really good spells in it and how to work them. Everything from healing to love and prosperity.
Okay, so one thing that I do want to talk about since we're going here. Oh my goodness, I am such a mess, and this is all being recorded. Okay, that's okay. People know that we're not too super
Rustic.
Okay, books like this monster, 1001 Spells. Okay, and I like this book. To be honest, I am in no way like this book. Okay, let me explain. Okay, Okay, all right. Okay, I like books like this because as a more experienced practitioner, I will pick a book up like this up, and I will flip through it. And for me, this is kind of like inspiration.
Yeah. Okay.
It's your Pinterest board.
Basically, yeah. Like, this is like, oh, that's a fun idea. Or, or that's a cool little incantation, and I'll take bits and pieces from something like this, and then I'll take that and I'll add that to my real spell, right? So books like this are amazing for those kinds of things. But I wanted to draw emphasis to these because these have become very popular. This one, Judica Isles, has I think like 7 or 8 of these bad boys out right now. And they're just basically huge compendiums of spells. But the problem with these kinds of books is the spell work that's in there is usually it's incomplete, right? Because it doesn't give you all of the preemptive stuff that you typically need to do as it would relate to preparing yourself, right? It also usually does not give you a whole lot of like post work because whenever you're doing spell work, there's always follow up that you need to do. Beyond that,
or the purposes of some of the magical materials in there.
Yeah,
it just tells you get these things together, put it in a thing, and do this, and say these words.
What I was going to say next is that they don't give you the history for why the spell, right? Why the spell, why it works.
Why the materials?
Why those materials, right? Like, why would you want to use yellow in this spell instead of blue, right? They don't really give you those pieces usually, and so as just like a copy and paste kind of an approach to your spell work, wonderful. But if you're really looking to learn, these are really not going to be good resources. So stick to credible authors, people who maybe are not as well known for putting out a whole lot of spells. But they're giving you the foundations that you need to really be able to create spells of your own that really will be powerful.
Oh, well, and another good book for that is actually The Witch's Book of Spellcraft, because while it has spells in it, it also talks about preparing yourself for a spell, the difference between a mill, the difference between a cone, and it gives you specifics as to what things are supposed to do. It has a really good section on oils.
By Jason Mankey.
Yes, it's Jason Mankey, Matt Cavalli, Amanda Lynn, and Ari Mankey.
Amanda Lynn, like the instrument.
So it's really good. It has some really awesome information in here, and it gives you purposes behind each and every one of the things that you're doing.
To be real clear, like most of these you will have to realize, okay, like this one, okay, this author, Jason Mankey, good author.
The camera's over there.
Smart dude. Okay, you're right, I keep looking over here. Smart dude. Sorry, I'm confused. I've got too many devices around me. But most of what Jason Mankey writes is going to be kind of heavily filtered through Wicca. Okay, and I'm not in any way trying to say that to be a bad thing. You're going to find that is the case with any author. Okay, Matt Aron, amazing author. Okay, but again, given Matt Aron's history, you're going to find a little bit of Wicca in here. You're going to find a lot of stuff popping in from fairy magical tradition. Okay, the same would be true of Devin Hunter.
Yes.
Okay, the only one I don't really know, like Laura Tempest Zakroff has actually been really good, I think, at not. She's always the wild card.
Laura Tempest Zakroff is most definitely like a traditional, like historical witch.
Well, and as would Keldon be. Keldon though is going to again kind of be kind of a little more kind of narrowed down to like the Anglo-Saxon,
the English
kind
stuff.
of witchcraft traditions.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think we kind of beat that one to death, didn't we? All right, let's see. So yes, they say they understand that there are many traditions, but they would also like us to share, if we can, info on what a spell book could look like from start to finish. So, in talking about maybe assembling, something that would be maybe like in some traditions people would consider a Book of Shadows, though a Book of Shadows is not a spell book. Or maybe more appropriately a grimoire.
They're not asking for a spell book. They're asking what a spell would look like from start to finish.
No, that's what I mean though. Like they're talking about, like basically like gathering that information, right? So, so in looking at that, I'm trying to think of. Go ahead, and you answer this one. I talked a lot on the last one.
So, a spell from start to finish, you need to know exactly what the end goal of the spell is. You need to know what the end goal of the spell is. And you can't just fly into your spell work thinking like, oh, well, these are the only things I have, so this is what I'm going to use. Lavender's great for money, and cinnamon is really cool for a baneful working because I think it's spicy, So that's not how that works. A spell, you need to know your correspondences. So, if you're going to be doing a protection spell, everyone always heads to salt. Salt neutralizes energy. Okay, so I would say probably don't go there, but find some good sources on what protection routes would be. Some good protection things like that, protection symbols, colors that would be associated with protection. You need to figure those things out, and then you want to decide, are you going to use candles? Are you going to use a poppet? Are you going to do something completely different? Are you going to incorporate sigils? What are you going to do? So it's more than just slapping things together and hoping for the best. This is why when people come in and they're like 2 weeks into their craft journey and they automatically go for, the 1001 book of spells, I'm like, you should probably actually get a book and learn how to ground first, and know some history, and actually know how to do the things and know what they're supposed to be doing, instead of just following what the book says, because you're just gonna get a half-assed result because you're being a half-assed witch. Anyway, so but a spell book in general is a good one, and we're looking at one that would be on the market. It needs to discuss why that particular herb or color or symbol. It needs to discuss how it's going to be used. It needs to tell you particular days, times, moon phases. It needs to be detailed. And on top of that, it's going to need to give you some basic information in the beginning on how to actually raise power and ground power. Because a lot of things fell.
They're going into this, so they know. Say, I know that they're there's the planning in advance, gathering your tools or materials, choosing days, grounding, raising energy, setting up a space. Okay, maybe with a fixed candle sigil, circle casting, opening a portal, calling on other energies, using your poppets for if they're sympathetic. Let's see. So they say, okay, with all of that, okay, just kind of maybe kind of narrow down this answer or focus this a little bit. So they say it seems like a lot, and they're wondering if it's normal to have to do all of that for a single working.
No.
And how to know which pieces are best for what.
Practice, trial and error, honestly. No, you don't need to cast a fucking circle to do a simple candle spell. You just don't. Unless that's part of your tradition.
And if you're doing a simple candle spell, particularly for something like abundance or, like a positive kind of thing, you don't need to be worrying about protection.
No.
Don't waste all your time and energy doing a protective working just to do another spell. That's ridiculous.
For a basic spell, if we're just looking at practical spellcraft, you need to make sure you have all your tools, the end goal, all your tools, how you're going to do it, the right times, and then go for it. You need to ground yourself before, align, then you need to raise your power, assemble your spell, do your spell, release said power, move on with your life. You don't need to cast a circle. You shouldn't be opening a portal to cast a fucking spell.
Well, it depends on if they're summoning a spirit of some sort.
If you're summoning a spirit, though, unless you're summoning a spirit that would require a portal, like a goetic spirit, if you're just acknowledging your gods or your ancestors, you don't need to open a portal because those spirits are already going to be around you.
Okay, so let's do like a steps 1, 2, 3, blah 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 blah.
Okay.
So all right, so you want to do a spell, right? You determine a need, right? Your next step should be to do some sort of divination work to determine yes, do I indeed need to do this spell? Because a lot of times we want to do the thing, right? But we don't really need to, right? Who knows? Maybe there's some other mechanism at play that would take care of that for you, right?
Or maybe a better spell.
Or
better working.
Or maybe you're not the one that should do the spell. So sometimes maybe in doing divination, it might pop up you're too close to this situation. Your perception's not where it should be. Maybe somebody else should take care of this for you.
Yeah.
So you're gonna do that. Okay, so you do your divination, your cards, whatever you do, come back and say, okay, yep, spell good. And so you move forward. You're like, okay, now I'm going to do the spell. Okay, your next thing, to be honest, you want to gather all your things and have those ready. Okay, from there, you want to make sure that you prepare yourself. Okay, and that means that you need to sit and figure out, okay, how, based on what I am asking, what I want to achieve with this spell, how is this ultimately likely to play out in however many possible scenarios, right? Because when you're doing spell work, there's always collaterals. Okay, and you need to also prepare yourself on an energetic level, not just psychologically and emotionally and physically, but on an energetic level. You need to do, if depending on your particular practice, some sort of cleansing. You mentioned energetic work, like grounding, these kinds of things, right? You start your spell. You bring all of your elements in. You do whatever you need to kind of open to officially, basically announce to the world and the universe, I'm doing a spell, right? In whatever sense. Right, you call in any kind of spiritual allies that you might want to work with, right?
But you don't need to.
You don't. You name and honor any of the things that are of significance. Like if you're working with a particular planetary power, you're working with a particular herb, you want to honor those spirits. And a really easy way to do that is to name them in your working. You do the physical logistics of your working, right? And you raise energy. Like you need to raise energy because you need something to kind of like you're not gonna get a rocket into the air unless you've got some fuel and some engines, right? So you need to raise some power, get all that going behind your intent, and then
what are some ways to raise power by yourself?
Movement, dance,
chanting,
your body, chanting, moving. Chanting can be helpful, but but I find that chanting you need to put your body into that chanting. Like if you're kind of working by yourself, one thing I like to do, depending on the nature of the working, is I like to utilize music. I'll play music and I'll actually I'll dance and I'll sing with the music, right, to whatever effect. And I choose music that's going to be specific to what it is I'm trying to do the working for, right?
Now, when you name an herb or you name that particular thing you're working with, you're not naming it. You're not taking the hyssop and saying, your name is George. That's not what we mean by when we say name.
I've been doing it wrong.
What you do is you take that herb and you acknowledge its spirit and you give it its job. Hyssop. Your job in this spell is to cleanse and remove any negative energies or spirits or entities that are attached to me or this person or this thing. As you burn and as your spirit is released, I ask that you push any of these things away, purify them, and make me clean. Something like that.
Oh. You do your spell. You raise your energy. You direct that intent. You release that. Okay? You, depending on the other logistics of your spell and how you set that up, you then need to make sure that you clear your space. Do not leave old spells and things lying around. That is a bad habit to form. Okay. Take care of any physical objects. I can see that's another question that you have here. We'll get to that one in a moment. Take care of any physical remainders that you have of that spell, right? And try to do so with as much of an idea of ecological friendliness as possible, right? Please do not leave your nasty stuff out in the world, or your spell remnants out in the world, right? And then after all of that's done, you need to ground. And you need to give yourself some time to decompress, and you need to sit and figure that out. You need to sit and kind of meditate on how did that working go? How did that feel? Right? Do I really feel like I accomplished something? Right? And with a little bit of practice, the answer to that will be yes, you do, because you'll connect. Okay. From there, you need to move on with your life. You need to, once you have completed a spell and you're really done with the work and you've sent that energy out to manifest in whatever way, you then need to step away from that working. Do not hover over your spells.
Don't pull cards to see what's happening. No. Don't obsess over it.
As soon as you do that, you have shown yourself and any other spirit that was paying attention to that work, you have shown them I don't really believe, I don't really deserve it, I don't really trust, and they're going to be like, well, then never mind, I'm taking back my energy, right? And so you want to be really careful about that. Now, to add to that, you talk about, and you do say you plan on doing your own research, and that's amazing, because the research and the learning should never, ever stop, ever, ever. Okay, even you've got, who knows, 40, 50, who knows how many years into your practice, you're still learning. You are still learning, absolutely. You should be. If you're not, then shame on you. All right, so they say, can we talk a little bit about how elements affect a spell, e.g. burying a petition in a jar versus burning it?
That comes back to correspondences and knowing what your correspondences are. Obviously, if you're burying something in earth is very slow moving, it's heavy, and so it's going to be a slower moving spell versus fire, which is quick. And,
or a standstill, earth can...
Yeah, earth can bind and hold.
Yeah.
And so you need to know your correspondences with that too, which again brings us back to probably shouldn't be casting spells unless you know your correspondences and how things work together, which again is why you're asking the question. So
I don't know. I'm kind of, my opinion on that is a bit different. I'm kind of...
No, I agree with your opinion in the you need to go and you need to do these things and you need to make those mistakes. But just because you're doing the thing and you want to get your hands dirty as quickly as possible with spell work, but you don't know what any herb that you're planning on working with does, or any stone that you're planning on working on does, or what color of candle to use, if you need to use a color of candle, what any of the elements are associated with. If you're literally just walking into a metaphysical shop going, I need to do a spell, Well, have you ever done any of this? Have you ever researched any of this? Nope, I'm just going to get a candle in this herb that I'm super drawn to, and we're going to do it. I'm like, okay, well, do you know what your spell's for? It's for money. Meanwhile, they have a black candle, and they're getting, like, you know, fucking agrimony, and you're like, okay, whatever. And the thing
They're
is
going to take those things, and they're going to banish the spirit of poverty.
you know, if they were smart enough and intelligent enough to actually think about that, then yes. But no, they're just like, I just really like black because it's my favorite color. And agrimony is a funny name, especially its folk name. Cocklebur. Oh my god, that's so funny. I'm going to use that in my spell.
You're an artist. And so I've heard different answers on this. Is black a color or is it a tone?
It's a value.
It's a value?
Yeah.
Oh god, I haven't heard that one. Okay.
There's value, chroma, and like saturation is usually how people are thinking about color at this point because of digital reasons.
Oh.
But that's a much longer discussion.
Okay, yeah,
You're
no,
not
I will have to,
prepared for
I'll have to talk to you about that, okay? Because I've heard that, I was like, I don't know.
So, but anyway, back to the subject at hand. You do need to make sure that you know your correspondence a little bit. Obviously, Earth, again, can bring things to a standstill, make things very slow. Fire is very transformative, quick. Fire can also be destructive. Air, if you're working with something to release to air, or you're working with the element of air, it's probably going to come quick, but it's probably going to be very disconnected and very weird.
Yeah, air's very good for detachment.
Yeah, you know, and then water, it's going to be emotional, or it's going to be very psychic and very spiritual.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure that the things that you're working with, you actually know the correspondences of, so that way you can kind of see how your spell's going to play out. That's why candle magic's so popular, because candle magic is usually going to be quick, it's fairly clean, sometimes, and accessible to everyone.
I'll buy that. Okay.
So know your correspondences for spell work.
They say, thank you for sharing your knowledge. Thank you so much for listening.
Yes.
And hopefully some of the very sassy information we just gave you is of value.
If you don't want sassy, don't listen to the Salty Witches podcast.
Fair.
Promised salt.
Fair enough.
Sass and salt are very similar.
Okay, so I have two more over here.
Okay, I only have one more.
Do you want to go next, or we should do another one of these?
I'll do one of mine.
Okay, you go for it.
Okay, so the next one
I'll sit here and tent my fingers evilly.
The next one, this listener's actually sent things into us before. I'm going to call them R. So this question is about an experience that I had. I'm actually currently writing to you via voice text while I'm on a walk. This will be lengthy. I'm sorry. That's fine. Everything is always lengthy, especially on the phone.
It's okay. We like that story, though.
Yeah.
I think because that gives us context to help us better answer your questions.
Yeah.
It also gives us a lot of really fun stuff to talk about and gossip about after we get done recording.
It also helps bulk up the
I'm just
episode.
kidding.
I like the bulking of the
It's
episode.
the fiber. It's the fiber of our
Oh my
episode.
God, it's the fiber of the episode. Anyway, so for a little bit of context, my great-grandpa, or Opa, my family's German, was really, really close to my dad and really close to me. Fun fact, he was in World War II, American side.
Is that a fun fact?
Which I connected with for whatever reason. Well, turns out in a past life, so was I. When he died, on his gravestone, instead of marking it with any sort of religious symbol, he decided to mark it with a sandhill crane, which is native to Florida, where I am. I've always thought about him when I see sandhill cranes, and so I basically said in the open pretty loudly, if you send me a sign, please do so through the sandhill crane so that I would know if it was him. So today, while I'm on my walk, I had a weird sandhill crane experience. I was about to cross the street, and as I was going to walk, I hadn't seen a car, but a family of cranes were crossing the road, which made the car have to stop. Didn't necessarily save my life. I'm sure the car would have seen me, but prevented an accident. Then I followed the group of them to a pond that I frequent. I had sat there and just watched them. It was a family of 4, 2 parents and 2 babies. The adult male took particular interest in me, and I was sitting there watching them scour for food on the ground. He just kept staring at me. In my heart, I feel like this was my Opa reaching out to me, but I don't know what to make of it. I know I want to do ancestral work. I know I want to talk to him, but I don't know where to start. I'm not a particular fan of altars. I know that that's like a go-to princess for ancestral work. I think that was process. There we go. Go-to process for ancestral work, but I just don't have.
Actually, I like princess in there. Let's change that back to princess.
Cool. Altars are a go-to princess for ancestral work, but I just have never had luck with it. So, any other tips and tricks for reaching out to him? Anything to warn me about that type of deal? And also, what you make of the experience? Is it him, or am I just overthinking things? Thank you so much for putting up with my long questions and always answering them so in depth. You guys are the best. I think that was In fact, your grandfather, especially since you stated out loud very openly, like, hey, send me a sign via this thing. And your grandpa was like, bet. And then you were like, slay. So, so I don't think you need to be, I don't think you're overlooking that situation. I don't think you're overthinking that situation. I think that's a really good thing. As for ancestral work, I would say an altar, but here's the thing. Everyone gets this weird idea when it comes to altars. They have to be this big, elaborate, fancy thing, and they don't. They don't. I guarantee you probably have some sort of family or ancestral altar in your home and you just don't know it because you haven't actually sat down and consecrated it. Do you have pictures of dead family members in your home? Are they all kind of scattered all around, or are they centrally focused in one area? That's okay. But also, not all traditions focus on an ancestral altar. An ancestral altar is going to be very specific to certain traditions, and it's going to be set up in very specific in very certain ways. So you don't actually need to have an ancestral altar. Simply a picture or the ability to just sit and have an open conversation with him or any of your ancestors is going to be good. The only benefit of an ancestral altar is that it's a meeting space, just like an altar for witchcraft is a meeting space between you and your spirits, and it's going to allow you to actually facilitate a deeper connection to not only the ancestors you know, but also the ancestors that you don't know. Did I get it?
I think so.
What would you like to say?
I agree with your assessment of the experience that they related. I think that because you were very specific in what you asked for, and that was something that was a little beyond just like your average, like, you're driving down the street and you look out your window and you just happen to notice like a sandhill crane, on the side of the road, right? There was a little more going on there, so I would agree with your assessment that this I think was something that could be spiritually driven.
Mm-hmm.
As to the comment they made about ancestral altars, I want to remind, we talked about this a few episodes back, but your physical being is an altar.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one that has a very direct connection to this spirit on a genetic level,
genetic and biological,
as well as on an energetic level. And so I think it's good. And one thing I would recommend, since you want to establish some sort of meaningful communication with this spirit, is if you've ever considered anything like astral projection or even like lucid dreaming kind of phenomenon, to actually if you can, take a picture of this spirit, and as you go to sleep, sit and focus just visually focus on that picture for a few moments and think of everything you can to conjure emotion, memory around that spirit as you kind of drift off to sleep. That is kind of seen as like a kind of a cheat or a mnemonic kind of a thing that people can do to kind of facilitate direct connection through dream time, which bridges us into subconscious / astral kinds of work or communication. And that could be another effective way maybe for you to establish more conscious communication. Conscious? I mean, I guess in that state you're unconscious, but ideally it would build you up to what I would hope would be more conscious communication with this spirit. That would be one other thing I would recommend. That does not involve altar work. Yeah. So.
All right.
Cool.
Perfect. Let's move on to the rest of your questions.
All right. Next one is from Jay. They say, I've been a listener to your podcast for a while now, and one of the episodes raised a question for me. They specified that it was the Spooky Encounters episode, I think,
okay,
for last Halloween, or during last Halloween. So as a person who is interested in the paranormal, they've always wondered why nothing out of the ordinary concerning spirits has ever happened to them. And they would ask, is it because I wish for something to happen almost excitedly? Like they want that, right? They want it, and that feeling alone, the excitement in them keeps spirits away.
Mm-hmm.
Are they saying, are they wondering maybe their own psychic senses are just so dull that they just don't feel anything, or potentially is it fear that could maybe somehow be a conduit that were to help certain types. They specify malevolent spirits, but I think we have to be really careful about that designation because a lot of the spirits that we would identify as malevolent spirits really are not. They're just spirits that are very different.
Extra.
Exactly, they're extra spirits. So
it's just in their nature.
So anyway, so to answer some of these, I want to say first of all, I don't think that the excitement that you approach wanting to have connections with spirits is really an issue. I think if anything, that level of energy, that emotional energy, really could be like a good amplifier for spiritual energy around you. So I don't think that's it necessarily. I also want to say that your as to your senses being dull, maybe. I think that most of us, until we actually do a little bit of work, we do some things actively to kind of open up, to develop, to cultivate the types of senses that we need to if we want to be communicating and connecting with spirits. I think that most of us have a little bit of work that we need to do there. I think to be honest, it's truly rare to see somebody born that is just already just primed and wired to just be like the psychic, right? It takes work like anything else. So I don't know about senses being too dull, at least not yours being any duller than anybody else's. I think that most everyone has access to these kinds of experiences, but it does take a bit of work for all of us. And if you haven't really had an opportunity to do anything to develop some of your skill, to develop some things around opening yourself up to spirit interaction, now maybe is the time to start. The final thing that you mentioned is fears, again, specifically being a conduit to malevolent spirits. It is. A lot of spiritual energies will approach us, how to word this? Different types of spirits are going to be drawn to us for different things. And intense emotion is always going to be a lure for spirits. And that can be happiness, that can be grief, that can be fear. It's all just emotion. It's all just energy, really. So, or a manifestation of some sort of energy, right? A vibration, an aspect of consciousness, whatever you want to call it, right? So I think that a lot of the times most spirits, they don't really distinguish. Like, they're not going to be any more interested in the person in the room that is afraid of them than they are the person in the room that is happy that they are there, right? So I don't think that's it necessarily. But there are, I think, particular situations and when dealing with particular kinds of spirits, not always malevolent, but just particular kinds of spirits, there are some spirits that do seem to be drawn to the misery and the upset and the fear, right? And I don't necessarily know why. It has something to do, I would suppose, or would expect it, that it would have something to do with that spirit's, that being, like, when what they're about, what comprises them, would you say, and this is an interesting question for you, a lot of ghost hunting shows, right? Like paranormal investigators, ghost hunters, they go into these places like old mental hospitals and asylums, sanitariums, prisons, these kinds of places, right? They go into these spaces where you hear stories, like historically there's evidence that like over the course of many, many years while that mental hospital was in operation, that the people that were kept there, the people that were there, the patients, the inmates, whatever, that they, a lot of the times they were abused, that they were really treated horribly by the staff, the doctors. A lot of them were, put through all kinds of horribly inhumane therapies and things, right? And all of that cultivates this air of, I think, fear and misery and grief and anger, certainly a lot of anger around those buildings. And without fail, every time a ghost hunting team goes into a space like that, that's one of the first things they pick up on, is that just that heavy, negative, like, and even the spiritual phenomena that's happening there, like intelligent haunting phenomena, most of the time that does seem to be relatively negative in nature. But I think that's why, is because the living people that have been within that space over so many years, because of the experiences they've been through and all of the upset, the hurt, the anger, the fear, the pain, all these things, that somehow that like stamps, like energetically.
Yeah, it stains.
There's like, it's like it's in the walls.
Yeah.
And it's going to attract spirits.
The stone tape theory.
Exactly. The stone tape theory. But it's going to attract spirits that would have like a similar, I think, kind of a vibration, right? If you've got a spirit that is, through its own existence, a spirit that is very closely connected to the vibration of the energy of grief, that spirit is going to automatically be drawn to someone who is in a process of grief, a grieving person, because that's what's familiar, that's what it knows. So the stone tape theory is this idea that natural deposits of particular minerals like limestone, basically quartz, minerals that have a lot of quartz in them, that when there are very large deposits of these kinds of minerals, because there is something on a molecular level about quartz and these other things that makes it really good at storing information, recording information energetically, that anytime you find a deposit like that occurring naturally somewhere, that like say like that happens in the land somewhere, right, and then they build a hospital on top of that land, where the hospital, like beneath it in the ground, there's like huge, who knows, right, all of this limestone and quartz, right, that the energies, the memories, the things that happen within those walls, the things that happen within that space somehow will move through, and there's a memory of those that will be captured in that stone. And so they refer to it as the stone tape theory, kind of like the stone is taping, like it's recording. And it's an older theory, like it's one that I think has been around since probably like the 70s or so. And it was really popular in the ghost hunting community for a long time, the paranormal investigation community. But I don't know that a lot of people are still giving that a lot of credence, though. I think there is something to it. Like, as witches, we recognize that areas will hold energy, absolutely.
Most definitely.
So there's something real there, but I just don't think that I don't see that being talked about as much in the ghost hunting community these days.
Isn't that an extension of animism?
In essence, yeah, right? Yeah, like, oh, boy, noisy motorcycles. Yeah, so that's a very, very messy and very layman's terms kind of explanation of stone tape theory.
Yeah. Well, and any time, like you were saying, like you go into a space like a hospital or a mental asylum, especially when it comes to like the paranormal shows, because I love watching the paranormal shows. I love watching paranormal shows because I'm like, they're dumb. Just some of the things, especially when you go in and like there's a particular one who's super antagonistic, and then like something actually happens and they're like, oh, and they get scared. I'm like, you asked for it. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Did you want this or not? But it's just like where energy stains, it imprints on particular areas, and you can tell in specific areas where certain things have happened. I mean, if you go to a place like Stonehenge, where, you know, there's obviously some sort of mysticism around Stonehenge and what it's used for, there's an imprint of energy there. Just like if you were to go to some of the holy wells or the wished wells, where in Cornwall and Devonshire, there's an energy around them because of what has happened there. Vice versa, if you actually walk into the temple space here, which is our classroom, you can feel a palpable energy because a lot of energy has been worked there. Walking into a space like an asylum, when there's that crazy, frenetic psychosis energy, that is energy that lingers and stays. How many times have we had someone who's come in and they've been obviously in a state of some sort of psychosis or spiritual psychosis, and like it amps up the store like crazy. Like the one person comes in and they leave their crazy here and they leave, and then all of a sudden it's just insanity with everyone who's coming in. And I'm not just talking insanity in the sense of like, oh, everyone who's now coming in is crazy. I'm talking like floods and hordes of people. It's chaos. It's because that energy seeks out other types of energy.
Yes.
Energy seeks its level.
So bringing it back, yeah. So I think you've got a few different things going on here, but it sounds to me like it's not fear. You don't need to, unless you really go looking for something that would be malevolent. The likelihood that you're going to really run into anything malevolent is really fairly rare.
Yeah.
You know, you might get a trickster here and there or something that could be mischievous, but these are not usually spirits that really want to harm
brownie.
you. You know, a brownie.
A brownie.
I liked that you rolled the R on brownie. It sounded very exotic.
Brownie.
Now you're just showing off.
Brownie.
All right. Anyway, but fear also, I do want to say, just to be clear, like, though we don't need to be fearful of these things, you do need to watch your fear, because fear can certainly be an attractor for particular kinds of spirits, as would anger, as would grief.
Well, and fear can also be a safety response too.
Yeah, fear isn't a bad thing. Like, fear keeps us alive. We need fear. We need fear. So work on doing maybe some exercises, doing some things that you can research to kind of develop some psychic skill. I think would certainly help. If you want to be able to connect and have meaningful communication with these kinds of spirits, you're going to have to do you're going to have to do the work. They're not going to do the work to talk to you. They don't need to, right? So,
Psychic Witch. It's a lovely book for psychic development for witches.
yeah, one of many. All right. Final question from M. No, not me. All right. Hello. I've been working on spiritual development for some time and don't feel ready to offer my services to the public quite yet. A lot of my development has been self-work because when I take a class, I feel like it's very introductory, and that I often have gotten to a point where I've surpassed that information on my own. Okay. After these classes and courses, people go out. Oftentimes, people will go out and immediately start to offer their services at a professional level, it sounds like. But this person says they clarify, but I want to make sure that I know damn well what I'm doing, and I want to know that I can do what's asked of me before I go out and start to do professional work for other people. Mm-hmm. Amazing. Ethical practice. Amazing. You right there, and we talk about this so much on the podcast. So many people will go out and buy a deck of cards and read the little book that comes with that deck of cards, and a month later they're like, I'm a psychic, I'm a tarot card reader, and that's amazing, right? But they're really still just at the beginning of that journey. They really, at that point, they should not be reading tarot at a professional level for anyone at that point. Because not only is doing these things about from the sound of from what you shared here, you understand this. Not only is this work about, or getting to a point where you're doing this work about learning your tools and the actual spiritual piece, so much of it is also about you, mm-hmm. and making sure that you are doing your personal work and that you are in a good place to really be putting yourself into a position of service, because that's what that work always is. It's always a position of service. So moving on to the kind of the answer there, or the question there, excuse me. They say, at what point do we recommend starting, or that people should start to offer services? And I will say that it is going to vary by person, mm-hmm. By practitioner. I know practitioners who, just for the benefit of who they are, their upbringing, the things that they've been exposed to in their lives, the things that who knows, right? That, they decide they want to tap into some ability. They work really well with that. And, and within, who knows, 6 months, they're at a point where they're like, I feel like I can do this well enough to do this for other people. But even in that moment, that doesn't mean that person stops still growing and learning, because we always have to grow and learn, even after you get to a point where you're doing service for people on a professional level. Mm-hmm. You're still learning and growing at that point. Yeah. That never stops, because you as an individual are always still growing. So I would say, as far as an answer to that, like, it really is going to depend. I think, and this is, for some people are going to hear this and they're going to go, that doesn't seem right, that doesn't seem fair. But I personally feel that you, based on your other just general life circumstances and your own personal history, I think that you need to devote like a good couple of years to this stuff, to learning your tools, to doing your personal work, to developing your skills around like your business ethics as it mm-hmm. relates to presenting the work that you do to other people, right? I think it's going to easily take a good couple of years to get a lot of that stuff down to a place where you're like, okay, I've got this down now, it's good, mm-hmm. right? And even then, that might not be long enough.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, you also want to make sure that you're in a good enough place just yourself mm-hmm. to be able to do that. Because if you have people coming in on a daily basis to get readings with you, or healing work, or spell consultations, and you're still trying to figure out how to just function as an adult, and you're sitting here with someone who is an adult and they're asking you financial questions, and you're like, haha, I spent $400 on a crystal and I didn't pay my light bill, then you probably aren't the person to be giving that person that advice. So you want to make sure that your life is in some way balanced. There are certain things that as a reader, you can completely and totally say, no, I'm not reading on that for. I can tell you right now, I absolutely hate doing relationship readings. I hate it. Because chances are, if you're coming in and getting a relationship reading about your boyfriend thinking that they're cheating on you, then there's already trust issues there. Why do you need me to pull cards to tell you that you need to leave him? You just need to do it. Not like you're going to listen, but, whatever. So
cheated.
Yeah. I mean, when pandemic hit and everything shut down, my first client was like, when am I going to find my next man? And I'm like, people are dying.
Yeah, that was really, really kind of a rough couple months there.
People are dying, and you're worried about when you're going to get your next fix.
I guess that just kind of led strength to what we always tell people, though. Like, really, at the end of the day, we all kind of just worry about the same shit.
Yeah. And so you want to make sure that your life is in some sense in some state of balance. There are days where I know I'm not open to doing healing work. If I'm in a really bad fibro flare and I'm like, I just am not going to be able to do this, I will tell my client if they show up, I'll say, I'm unable to do healing work for you. I know that's what you booked. So if you'd like to reschedule, we could do that. Or I could try and power through. Or we could pull some cards and actually see, do you need healing work? Or do you just need someone to tell you, like, this is where the bear shit's in the woods? And most of the time, spirit tends to help line you up. And your spirits tend to help make sure that what you're capable of handling is what you're presented with in that day and in that time. So you want to make sure that you're in a somewhat balanced state, which it sounds like you've been doing that. But like Mike said, you need to know your tools. You need to know your tools. I can't tell you how many times I've had someone sit down to do a test read for me, and the first thing they do is they pull the cards and whip out their book. And I'm like, I end the reading right there. That, or I decided to do the dick boot and go, put your book away and actually read for me. Well, I need my book. Then you don't need to be reading for other people. Sorry.
There are some people that would say that you are being ableist with that perspective.
Okay.
No, I think that's worth addressing. We talked about
if you do not know your tools and you're using your tools to work for other people and you don't know your tools, you probably shouldn't be using your tools that you don't know to work for other people.
Well, I think maybe like a more constructive way to address that, because I do agree with you, right? You're not going to become a surgeon until you've effectively learned how to use a scalpel, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would hope not. Anyway, but I think to answer that, or to address that piece a bit more constructively, I would probably say that if you find, for some reason, if you are someone who wants to do this kind of work, you want to tap into your psychic ability, you want to do this, and for some reason it doesn't matter how much you've tried, you cannot work effectively with the tarot. Ooh, I'm like a spooky ghost. As the light has gotten darker outside, we're like, boom, like bright light. That's okay. That's okay. Just slap some more Vaseline on the lens. Anyway, I think it's probably better to say, like, maybe the tarot, if you've struggled to learn, or if the tarot's that's a beefy fucking divination system, man. I mean, there's a lot going on there, a lot of cards. Maybe the tarot isn't your thing, right?
And that's okay.
And that's okay. Find something else, right? Something that you don't need to, because that's gonna allow you to work with your own strengths, because you have them, absolutely,
mm-hmm.
right? A lot of times I think what we perceive as weaknesses are actually the things that are showing us, no, this instead, right? This is your
tarot
strength,
is not the only form of divination.
Exactly. There's so many other
Reiki's
things.
Not the only form of healing modality.
Yeah, right? Or you could be like me and not have to worry about anything because the angels do all the work. Anyway, but I think that rather than focusing on, well, if you can't memorize your tarot, I guess you can't read tarot. I don't know that that's necessarily fair. I think it would probably be more effective to say, maybe you just need to look elsewhere.
Okay, well, I'm going to say this. There's a difference between memorization, because you can memorize tarot all day, every day, pull the cards, and not actually give a good reading.
Yeah, well, actually, I always tell people, that's kind of that's the distinguishing thing between a reader and a psychic.
Yes.
Memorizing cards is different than interpretation.
Yes.
Exactly.
Because in order for you to actually interpret the cards, you have to be intuitive. You have to see what's happening and where the story's at. So yeah, you might have the King of Pentacles.
Don't bump the table.
You might have the King of Pentacles that has just fallen, And obviously we know King of Pentacles. Ah, yes, money. A man who really knows his worth and like is really good with his money. But then you have all these other cards that are falling around it that are indicating no. No. And then all you're going to do is you're going to have this memorization. You're going to be like, well, these cards mean this. And then you're going to leave your querent with, that made no sense. So it is still up to you to interpret it. So I'm not saying that you need to memorize the tarot cards. Because guess what? I don't have the tarot cards memorized.
Really?
Yeah, no. I have studied them and I've worked with them. I know their correspondences. I know that pentacles are earth and are usually related to earthly matters. It's so much more than just memorizing that the 3 of Swords means that you're gonna be betrayed.
Well, you also have to learn how to apply those things in very different contexts.
Exactly. Because you could have someone sitting...
Every reading, every question, every client is different.
Yes, well, you could have someone sit down who doesn't want anything to do with a relationship reading, and then you're pulling cards that are all like the relationship cards. Chances are it's not going to be about a platonic or romantic relationship. It could be a business relationship or something else, or a relationship with their self or their spirits.
Or just like a very transactional kind of relationship.
Exactly. So you still need to learn how to interpret them without the book, but you also need to understand like where you're going with it and like some of the correspondences.
So this person follows up with a little more conversational piece here. They say that they've been doing this on their own, and the courses that they take and the info that they read is a lot of it coming from the New Age community. Mistake number 1. No, you're good. No, I understand. It's easy to find information coming from the New Age community because they are so loudly proclaiming their ignorance. Anyway, but I want to encourage you to strike out and to try to find some resources from some other places. Be diligent about that because while there are some good pieces of information within what we would identify as New Age kinds of spiritualism, 95% of it has been appropriated again and again and again. So much of it is rooted in the old philosophies of white supremacy. You know, so much of it is all about spiritual bypass and high vibes only kinds of mentality. And the New Age community has just done so much harm.
You're bipolar. You don't need to take your meds. You just need exorcism.
In the last 60 years or so, the New Age spiritual movement has done almost as much damage to humanity's evolution as Christianity has.
I would agree 100%.
They're just not as violent.
Sometimes.
Let's see. So they say that they do go on to say it's difficult to decipher what is legitimate information and what is fluff. And I agree, right? It's really hard. Even within the witchcraft community, we run into that. There are very well-known figures, authors, speakers, teachers, witches in the witchcraft community that I'm just going to tell you right now have no fucking business being in the witchcraft community. And that's going to make me sound like an elitist and very gatekeepy, but it's very easy to proclaim yourself a teacher, right?
Doesn't mean you're good at it or that you know what you're talking about.
Exactly, especially when everything you're presenting is based
bullshit.
Off UPG. So let's see. So they can say, yes, it's like a double-edged sword. This sometimes for them, like they want the information, but then they give the information and it's not good information. They don't identify as a witch, but they say that they wish that they had lived in Utah so that they could take courses from us.
Good news. A lot of our courses are actually available online.
Yes,
fully interactive.
Yes, we make a lot of our classes things available online. So if there's ever anything that you want to do, you let us know. And you've been very good to send your questions and things to the podcast, but you can also contact us at the shop through any of our social media feeds, through our website. You can give us a call and we will happily talk and share information. That's really why we're here. So they feel like they sit kind of in the middle of being a witch and being a light worker. And that's okay. That's not a bad place to be. Yeah.
It actually might balance out a little.
I think so. I think that's not a bad place to be, particularly if you are still at a point where you're maybe more eclectic in your approach to your practice. You kind of have to be honest, because being an eclectic practitioner usually removes you somewhat from established traditions, right? Because once you become part of a tradition, you're not really eclectic anymore. Now you're like, boom, now you're locked in, right? So you have to kind of fill those missing pieces, and that's going to be where a lot of the stuff coming from light work and New Age kinds of philosophies is coming from. But again, be very careful there. And they love the podcast. Well, thank you so much. The podcast loves you as well.
Yes, thank you, Saltines.
Yes. And that's it.
Okay. Well, we answered all listener questions. So what's coming up at the shop if people are interested?
Tomorrow evening, we have the Basic Witch Study Group.
Yes, so tomorrow evening.
7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time.
Yes, and I do believe are you making that available online?
It is available online.
You have to call and
Yeah.
You need to call and let us know.
Yeah, you have to call, let us know so we can get your email so we can do that.
It's free. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything other than just your time, and you want to make sure you have a reliable internet connection.
Yes.
So that you can actually, engage. But that's a really cool class because it's basically like a free tutorial on witchcraft.
I get to ask questions.
Yeah.
Make
Yeah.
And then we have the Vessels of the Gods Medusa coming up. Now, Medusa's not a god, but Medusa is a very powerful energy that a lot of people have been connecting with, and very powerful spirit. And Mike will be handling that and leading everyone through that, so that'll be good. Obviously, we have the Awakening the Witch course starting on August 5th.
It is almost August. It's crazy.
Yeah. So the Awakening the Witch course is a 6-month-long course in traditional witchcraft, being taught by yours truly. It is available online. Yes, I said that right. It is available online. Yes, you can learn witchcraft online because basically...
Like on Udemy?
No, not like that.
Oh.
It is fully interactive. It is all that. I record the things to make sure that if you need to, you can go back and look it up. We've had lots of people who have taken this course and really succeeded in it and really enjoyed it. One of which is Frankie Ann Castanea, aka Chaotic Witch Aunt, who wrote Spells for Change, which is on the bottom shelf between Stickstones, Roots and Bones, and the Satanic Bible.
There we go. Yes, another book.
So Spells for Change by Frankie Ann Castanea. We love...
Good book. Excellent book.
Awesome. If you're looking to start your witchcraft journey, this is your book. It tells you so much. It gives you very digestible information along with practical spells that you can do once you're ready. It's just fantastic. And so if you're looking to really get your feet wet into traditional witchcraft and really take that next step, then the Awakening the Witch course is for you. There are limited in-person spots, but there's unlimited online spots.
You said that you're looking to get your feet wet in witchcraft. You're like, why would I want to get my feet wet in
Witches melt when they get wet.
The things your feet would get wet by are probably gross.
That's true.
That's okay. It's fine.
A lot of mess. Yeah.
That does cost. It is not free. I'm sorry. You will pay for me to be a mentor. That's how that works. So, and then we have a whole bunch of other stuff coming up in August. I think we have a seance.
On the 29th.
Yeah, we have a seance coming up on the 29th of July.
That is in person only.
That is in person only, unfortunately. And we'll be doing a traditional seance, so it's not going to be,
It's going to be like everybody sitting around a table holding hands with a medium, and we're going to be like, there'll be like table tipping and knocking and all kinds of other crazy
ectoplasm is going to be coming out of my nose. It's going to be fantastic.
Out of your nose. It comes out of everywhere.
It's true. So keep an eye out. If you want more information on the offerings that we have coming up at Cat and Cauldron, then go ahead and head over to our site, www.catandcauldron.com. You can also follow us on all of our social media pages. Also, like and subscribe to our YouTube page. You'll get all those notifications for the upcoming things. And again, if you have any further questions that you want us to answer, go ahead and shoot those over to thesaltywitchespodcat at gmail.com, and we'll get you taken care of. All that information can be seen in the comments below.
That was a lot. Okay.
It's almost like I'm born to do this.
Oof.
Hit that like and subscribe button. Stay salty.
And
Happy witching.
And send us your comments. Send us your comments and your questions. As you can see, we will answer them. So.
Yeah. So, happy witching.
Bye, everybody.